بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات. واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق: شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. The month of Ramadan is the month in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Holy Quran as a guide and a clarifier to all. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Let's raise our hands in dua and say after me: رب اشرح لي صدري. Allah, open up my heart and my mind to receive the information I'm about to learn. ويسر لي أمري, and ease my affairs. واحلل عقدة من لساني, and untie the knots in my tongue. يفقه قولي, so that they may understand what I'm about to say. ربي أرني الحق حقا فأتبعه. Oh Allah, let me see the truth as the truth so that I may follow it. والباطل باطلا فأجتنبه, and falsehood as falsehood so that I may avoid it. ولا تجعله متشابها علي, and don't let there be a confusion between the two. فأتبع هواي بغير علم, lest I follow my whims without even realizing it. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So I promised you that we would come back to this important point, and that is after we realize that our Creator is the unlimited and that He's the one that brought us to this life. We said that since He's unlimited, that means He's all perfect, that means that He's all purposeful, right? And we said our true purpose in life is to show our Creator gratitude first and foremost, right? Because He has the greatest right upon us, even greater than our parents, right? You agree? If you agree, say I agree. Good. So then we said, okay, well, how can I show Him my gratitude? We said, well, there are two ways. One way is to emulate Him, just like you would emulate your parents, and that would make them proud of you, right? So the same thing with your Creator. You see that He is tolerant with all of His creations. You see that He is kind with all of His creations, therefore you are tolerant and kind. You see that He is merciful with all of His creations, therefore you are merciful as well, right? You see that He is benevolent, which means that He gives us things that we need without us even asking for them or knowing that they're good for us and we need them. And so we would do the exact same thing. And so we understand on a basic level then, emulating the akhlaq, the mannerisms or the manners of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a great way to be able to fulfill that purpose and to show our gratitude. But we also said that one of the ways to show our gratitude, just like with our parents, when, for example, it's their birthday or something, instead of going out and guessing what it is that they might like, it's a lot better for us to find out from them directly what it is that they would like for their birthday. Agree, Chad? Right? Yeah. So you're more likely to bring happiness to their hearts if you were to do so. Otherwise, it's just a shot in the dark. They might like it, they might not like it, right? It might be that moment where, they see what you got them and then they kind of cringe and say, oh, thank you, with an insincere smile, right? You want them to smile sincerely. You want to make them happy. So what do? You find out from them, well, what would you like for your birthday, right? And then when you find out, when it's the day of the birthday, it makes your parents very happy when they know that they received exactly what they had asked for, right? Because you cared enough to ask. So then it makes sense that you should communicate with your parents and they should communicate back. Agreed? If you agree, say I agree. Now, we find this system of communication is also extremely important in everyday life. So, for example, when I go to school, any school that you go into, any class that you are a part of, the first thing that they do is they give you what? They give you any class that you go into. What do they give you? No, they give you a syllabus and they give you a book, a textbook, right? And they provide you with a teacher, right? There's three basic things that they would give you in any educational system, okay? So the syllabus is going to give you an overall understanding of what will be covered in the course. The textbook are the details, okay, of the syllabus, what you're going to study, when you're going to study it, right? What are the different modules you're going to study, agreed, right? And then, of course, they also tell you when your tests will be. How does it feel when you go into class and a teacher gives you a pop quiz? Everybody likes pop quizzes, right? No, nobody really likes pop quizzes. So the reason why they don't like them is because, and the first thing they say, of course, when a teacher says pop quiz, right, put your books away, is, my God, this is so unfair, right? We didn't know. Why didn't they? We're not prepared. So would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring us to this world, right? And give us tests in this world and not give us the tools or communicate with us to tell us what He wants of us? Because if He did, that would be unfair. Do you all agree? If you agree, say I agree. So if I understand the necessity of communication, right? So if I wanted, for example, to go out with Ustad Ahmed, okay? Go for a coffee. And I go and I sit in a coffee shop. Of course, this is after iftar, because we're in the month of Ramadan. So, and I go to the coffee shop and I sit and I wait and I wait and I wait. And I see him the next day and I say, why didn't you show up? And he said, well, nobody told me, right? Because I never communicated with him. Would it be fair for me to, have him, give him a piece of my mind, right? Without him actually knowing, without me even communicating with him? Would it be fair? No, it wouldn't be fair. And so it doesn't make sense that you judge someone, right? And you haven't told them what you're going to judge them on, what your expectations are. Agreed? So then there's a necessity for communication. So it's got to be that by priority, He who gave me the intellectual capacity to understand the necessity of communication when it comes to educational systems, when it comes to communicating with my own family, with my friends, right? That He by priority would also communicate with me. Make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. So it's got to be then that He's got to be able to send me something. I've got to receive something from Him, right? I don't know, a Snapchat message, a Facebook message, something, right? Maybe hit me up on Discord or something, right? It's got to send me some message, right? So the question is then, since there is that logical necessity, because it would only be fair for Him to do that, it would be unfair if He doesn't. Agreed? We agreed on that, yes? Good. So the question is, how do I know that a message is His? And this is where going back to the characteristics of the Creator becomes essential. Think about it. If I'm, let's say, in class, okay, and let's say I myself and Brother Sajjad were in the same class, we have a teacher, let's say our teacher is Abu Hassan, okay, and he knows us really well, we've been with him all year, and he gives us a test, and it's an essay, okay, and we both forget to write our names on the essay, okay. Now, he's seen us before, he's seen our handwriting, so he can differentiate between us based on the characteristics of our handwriting, okay. He can also differentiate between us because he knows, that Brother Sajjad reads a lot, so he's very eloquent, for example, when he speaks, and so therefore he would probably be eloquent when he writes, right? And he knows me, I'm not a reader, okay? So I'm going to goof up with my grammar a little, so he's going to be able to differentiate between the two. Why? Because he knows the characteristics of each of his students. Does that make sense? That makes sense? It makes sense. So that means then, we can safely say that a message reflects the characteristics of its author. Does that make sense? You all agree with that? Right? So then it makes sense for us to understand what is the most important characteristic of our Creator, and then say, okay, well, is this reflected in whatever message is presented to me? Does that make sense too? Good. So what is Allah's most important characteristic? That He is what? That He is unlimited, first and foremost, right? That's the most important thing. So since He is unlimited, we said that means He's all perfect, right? He's flawless. So that means that He will have no errors in His message. That means He will not contradict Himself at all. Agreed? That means obviously His message will be for a purpose, and that is to guide us, right? And to teach us and let us know what His expectations are of us. But first and foremost, we have to understand that since the Creator is unlimited, what did we say? We said a creator of something is greater than what they create. Therefore, the creator of limitation must be unlimited, right? And since He's unlimited, He doesn't have a beginning, doesn't have an end, which means He is constant and unchanged. He always existed and will always exist, as you were saying, Sajjad Hassan. So that means then, if He always existed, will always exist, that means He's constant and unchanged. So that means the first criterion of this message needs to be based on the fact that He's constant and unchanged, and so His message has to be constant and unchanged over time. That's the first criterion. Okay. Now the second criterion is also from the fact that He is an unlimited Creator. Okay. Since He's unlimited, we said He's all perfect, which means He's flawless, which means He's not going to give me a message that has any errors or any contradictions in it. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah? Shahid? Agreed? Good. So, first, it has to be unchanged over time and constant. Second, it has to be perfect, no contradictions whatsoever. The third characteristic is that it has to correct any false claims that were made by scholars of other religions or by atheists. Does that make sense? Because it has to rectify wrong thinking, right? And it has to rectify any sort of fabrications that have been propagated to humanity so that everybody gets back on the straight path. Agreed? Fourthly, it's got to be that this message has information about this universe and its creation that nobody would know except for the Creator himself. Does that make sense too? Think about it. Nobody would know, right, information about this universe unless he was the creator of this universe. Think about it. Like if you buy a car, right, the manual for your car is made by whom? It's made by the manufacturer of that car, right? So nobody knows best when the car needs an oil, lube, or filter, or what its parts are, or where, what type of parts can replace other parts, what kind of oil do you use for your car, except for the manufacturer. So this is the idea, right? So it's got to be that only there has to be information in that message that no one would know except for the Creator himself. Yes, they can discover it later on, right? But there would still be information in there that nobody would know except for him. And lastly, it's got to be that it's miraculous and supernatural. Why? Because it's got to be beyond nature, supernatural. Because nature, natural, is what? Is limited. So if he's supernatural, it means he's above nature, which means he's unlimited. Therefore, that means that his message also has to be above nature, right? Which means it has to be miraculous. Does that make sense? If it makes sense, say it makes sense. Okay. So we're not going to be able to cover all of the criteria today, but we'll cover the first two, okay? Just so that we make sure that the information sets in well and that you can retain it, okay? And tomorrow we'll cover a few more, inshallah, of those criteria. So we said the first criterion and the second criterion are based on the fact that the Creator is unlimited, right? We said the first one, since he's unlimited, it means he always existed, will always exist, which means he's constant. Therefore, his message must be constant. So, the first thing we need to look at is we need to say, okay, well, who is presenting a message to us claiming that it is a divine message, that it is from our Creator? And now, if we look at what's out there, we look at the Torah, which is presented to us by which group of people? The Jews, exactly. People who are Jewish, they follow the Torah. They claim that the Torah is the book of God, right? Then we have the Christians. They have the Holy Bible. They claim that this is the book of God. And then you have the Muslims, and they have the Holy Quran, and they claim that this is the book of God. So we will be looking at these three books. We'll be applying those 5 criteria to each of these books and see, do they match the criteria? Okay? If it matches the criterion, it moves on. Okay? So, let's take a look at, first and foremost, let's look at the Torah. Okay? Because the Torah is older than the Bible, right? And the Holy Quran. So, if we look at the Torah, what do we find? First of all, do we have, of course, the Torah is supposed to be the book of Prophet Moses. Prophet Musa, exactly. So, the Torah itself, as it exists in its current form today, it doesn't actually exist. They don't actually have the Torah today. Okay, why? Because the Torah was burned centuries ago. Right? But what they do have today, what they call the Jewish Bible, okay, or the Torah, which is also known as the Pentateuch, which are the first 5 books of the Old Testament, of the Holy Bible. Okay? So now, since we don't have the original Torah, that means that obviously it's not constant. I mean, it's been lost, it's gone. We don't have it, right? So that means that the Torah doesn't pass the first criterion. So let's look at the Holy Bible next. The Holy Bible, of course, is the book that was brought as the message of Jesus alayhi salam. Now, the current Bible that we have today, is this the exact same Bible that was revealed to Jesus alayhi salam? No, it actually isn't. The original Bible was lost. Okay? So then what is this Bible that we have in our hands today? If you go into the halls of academia and you ask, or you just Google it, simply Google it, you will find that it states that the current Bible we have in our hands was written 100 years to 1300 years after the death of Jesus. Okay? Of course, we don't believe, us Muslims, that Jesus died. We believe that he was raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we'll talk about that later. So that means the current Bible we have today isn't even the real Bible. Okay? But rather, the Bible is composed of two parts: the Old Testament and the New Testament. Al-Ahd al-Qadim and Al-Ahd al-Jadid, we say in Arabic. The Old Testament and the New Testament. Now the Bible itself, both Old and New Testaments, are made out of smaller books called Gospels. Okay? So these Gospels were written by men, by normal men. Okay? They were not written by Jesus, because we said 100 years after the death of Jesus, the Bible, they were writing the Bible, okay? Up until 1300 years after his death. So that means it was a constant project, okay? Now, what it also means is this, is that since it's different people that wrote each gospel, it makes common sense that we need to know who they are, right? Because how do I know if I can trust this person if I don't know who he is? I need to authenticate that this person is connected somehow to Jesus or to God, right? But the problem is that over 85% of the authors of the Gospels of the Holy Bible are unknown. And this is not something I'm claiming. This is something that they will tell you, okay? This is something they'll tell you. Now, there are some who come, if you Google it, and claim, no, there were 40 people who wrote it, we know who they are, but in actual fact, this is a fabrication. This is not true, okay? In actual fact, 85% of those who wrote the gospel, meaning 85% of the gospel, we don't know who the authors are. And this is what's taught in modern halls of academia. Today, if you go online and you take a Bible study in the School of Divinity at Yale University, you find that the professor there will tell you right off the bat exactly what I'm telling you right now. Okay? That 85% of the authors are unknown. So then what do they say? How do they justify that these books are part of the Bible? They say that the Holy Spirit entered them, right, and inspired them to write. But the problem is, you see, as based on the simple example that I gave you earlier, if Sajjad was to write something and I was to write something, if Ahmed was to write something and Yusuf was to write something, if Shahid was to write something, if the Hajjaj were to write something, each of us would have a different style of writing, right? Each of us has a different capability when it comes to our writing styles, when it comes to how creative we may be in our writing styles. Some of us may be more factual, others may be more creative, right? So then, also some of us know more than others in different fields, agreed? So then, that means that each one is going to be missing something, plus we're human, we're limited, so that means that we're going to have some sort of error there, right? There are going to be some errors. So, okay, so that means then, first and foremost, we know that since the Bible that we have today is not the Bible that we had during the time of Jesus, that tells us that the Bible is not constant, right? Since it was created 100 to 1,300, it literally took 1,200 years to make, after the death of Jesus, that tells you that this was a process, that took over 1,000 years. So that means then there's not that constancy. It's not constant, right? Which means then the Bible does not meet the first criterion as well. So now here at this point, we can say that the Torah and the Bible are out of the running, but we're going to, still apply the second criterion to them just for good measure, okay? Now, what about the Holy Quran? Now, the Holy Quran was revealed about 14 to 1,500 years ago now, okay? And if you look at a Holy Quran from that time period to, 200 years after, 300, 400, 500, 600, until this very day, until we reach 1,400 years later, whether you look at a Quran that's in China, okay, or you look at a Quran that's in South America or in North America or where the Eskimos live, in Antarctica or the Arctic Circle or Greenland or Iceland or wherever, the Quran will be exactly the same. When we're talking about the Arabic, why? Because we still have the original Arabic. We still have the original Arabic, and the original Arabic From the very first Quran until, historically speaking, until this very day, if you compare them, they're exactly the same. Now, some of the older ones you might see, it might be a different font. Okay? Right? It might be a different font. But the numbering of the chapters is exactly the same. The order of the chapters is exactly the same. Down to the harakah, down to the short vowel and the long vowel. Now, in the old calligraphy or font, you might see that there's 1 dot, 2 dots, 3 dots. Each one represents a fatha, dhamma, or kasra, right? Until they developed in the newer fonts, the fatha, dhamma, and kasra. But they were all fatha, dhamma, kasra anyway, right? In terms of harakat, in terms of short vowels. So there's no difference at all, whether you compare a Quran from when it was revealed to this very day. No difference whatsoever. So it is the only book so far that if we examine carefully, we will find that it's the only book that came out with, that still exists in the original language and is still in the exact same form to the, not to the T, to the harakah. Okay? So then the Quran passes the first criterion. So the second criterion we said was what? What was the second criterion? Who can remember? We said that since the unlimited is flawless, that means he's all perfect. That means his message also has to be perfect, which means that it can't have any contradictions, right? Now, let's go book by book now and apply the second criterion to it, okay? Ahsan, that it has to be, no, constant was the first one. This one is no contradiction, yeah. Okay, because the second criterion is, since the creator is perfect, that means that his message is perfect. That means it can't have any contradictions or mistakes. So now we can't examine the Torah because we don't have the Torah, but we do have the Old Testament, and we do have the New Testament. So we'll do the Torah and the Bible at the same time. Okay? Because remember, the Jewish Bible is the first 5 Gospels of the Old Testament. Okay? All right. So let's look at Genesis, the very first Gospel within the Bible. Okay? And Genesis speaks about the creation of the world, creation of Adam, and so on, and the prophets. So in chapter 7, verse 1, it speaks about Noah, Prophet Noah. Okay? It says that God found Noah to be the most righteous of his generation. Okay? That sounds very, that sounds like something God would say, right? Because we believe that Noah was a prophet of God. So, great. So now if you read on and you move on to chapter 9, verses 20 to 25, it says something interesting. It says that one of the sons of Noah first of all, in verse 20, it says that Noah's ark basically landed, it anchored on land. And the first thing that Noah did was he became a husbandman and he planted a vineyard. Interesting. Planted a vineyard out of all things, grapes. Okay, why? Usually when you plant a vineyard, it has something to do with wine, but this is a prophet of God. Well, let's read on, okay? So as you read on, up to verse 25, it talks to you about a story of how one of the sons of Noah actually found Noah in his tent, uncovered, meaning naked, not wearing any clothes, okay, and drunk. Drunk, you say? That's interesting. Now, okay, so unclothed, maybe he was changing his clothes. He's in the privacy of his own tent, right? But drunk? Does that sound righteous to you? Would a righteous person, the most righteous of his generation, would he do something that is as unrighteous as being drunk? Now, let's say, God forbid, let's say, that drinking and being drunk was not something that God had forbidden at that time. Let's say, okay? Let's say if we can find proof in the Bible that states that that's the case. In actual fact, if we look into Proverbs, chapter 20, verse 1, chapter 23, verse 20, chapter 23, verse 32. So I've given you 3 verses just from Proverbs, which is in the Old Testament, okay? What does it say? In chapter 20, verse 1, it says, "And wine is a mocker, strong drink is raging, and whosoever is deceived is unwise." So what is it saying? It's saying that wine makes a mockery out of whomever drinks it, humiliates that person, right? Turns them into being unrighteous. Right? Think about what kind of intellect must the person have that they know that this alcohol is going to render them a mockery in front of people, and yet they would still drink it. Right? So then this is not a person who would be righteous that would drink this wine. And not just that, it creates rage in a person. They become someone different. Right? It changes their personality and their character. And then whosoever is And whosoever basically partakes in it, right, is unwise. Whosoever is deceived by it is unwise. So deception comes from Satan, which means that this person has been deceived by Satan. But a prophet, the most righteous, is usually a person who is not deceived by Satan, right? He's been able to defeat Satan. So that tells you then what? That tells you that this is problematic. And according to the Bible, right, a person who drinks wine is made a mockery of, can't control themselves, right, becomes raging, and they're deceived. They have a low intellect. They're unwise, right? So that's chapter 20, verse 1 of Proverbs. Now in chapter 23, verse 20, what does it say? It says, صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. نصلي على محمد وعلى محمد. It says, so let's go to 23 verse 32 and then we'll go back to that one, okay? So verse 23, chapter 23 verse 32, what does it say? It says, afwan. But let's go back to 23:20. I remembered it now. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Alhamdulillah. Okay. And do not be amongst wine bibbers, riotous eaters of flesh. Okay. So the Bible is actually commanding you not to be amongst those who drink wine. So now you could say, what does it mean? Do not be amongst wine bibbers, meaning do not be one of them, or just don't even be around them, right? So it makes logical sense that it would mean don't be around them, and definitely by priority don't be one of them, right? Okay, so that's a prohibition according to the Bible. Not just not to drink, but not to be even around people that drink, right? Okay, now Proverbs chapter 23, verse 32. What does it say? It biteth like a serpent and what? And poisons like an adder, right? So, meaning that it's venomous like an adder. An adder is considered to be one of the most venomous snakes in the world. Okay? So it biteth like a serpent. Think about it. When a person drinks alcohol, what happens? They become addicted. The serpent, what does it do? It basically suffocates the person, right? Winds itself around them, suffocates them, takes a bite out of them, right? That's exactly what alcohol does to people, right? It becomes an addiction. And not just that, it's poisonous for their system. It stingeth like an adder. That's what the verse said. It stingeth, not poison. It stingeth like an adder. So that means what? That means that it's venomous, right? It's poisonous. And we know, modern science has proven, that it's actually poisonous to your liver and it kills brain cells, right? My father was a liver transplant surgeon, okay? And I asked him once, I said, people who get liver transplants, why do they get liver transplants? He said the biggest cause of liver transplants, meaning liver cirrhosis, meaning the disease of the liver, is drinking alcohol, and he said tattoos, the ink from tattoos, right? So, but drinking alcohol is so poisonous to you that it'll literally kill your liver, right? So then, what have we learned now? That is there a contradiction between chapter 9 verses 20 to 25 and between Proverbs, or no? Yes, there is. In actual fact, there's a prohibition to drink. So it can't be then that Noah, the most righteous of his generation, a representative of God, that he would have had alcohol, let alone have been drunk. Okay. Now let's look at the New Testament. In the New Testament, in the chapter of Luke, in the Gospel of Luke, in the first chapter, verse 15, what does it say? It speaks about Prophet Yahya. Okay, and it says, and he was great in the sight of the Lord, and he neither drank wine nor strong drink. And he was great in the sight of the Lord. Wow, that sounds like that Noah was the most righteous of his generation. Very similar, right? And he neither drank wine nor strong drink. So it's not just wine. Strong drink is what? It's like you have a soft drink, like pop or sodas, right? And you have strong drinks that are hard drinks, right? That have liquor in them, right? Okay, spiked drinks, they're called hard drinks, right? So that means then a prophet of God is not allowed to drink wine. He neither drank wine nor strong drink, nor any alcoholic beverage. None whatsoever, okay? Not a Coke with rum, not a bourbon, not a vodka, nothing whatsoever. You say, oh, this is potato alcohol. No alcohol whatsoever of any kind, right? So then there's an obvious contradiction between within the Old Testament and between the Old Testament and the New Testament. Which means what? Which means now the Bible and the Torah, the Jewish Bible, both we cannot take, right? Because they have contradictions in them. So they don't pass the second criterion. Now if we look at the Holy Quran, we find that there are no contradictions in it whatsoever. Now there are some who said, well, there's a verse in the Quran that says you should kill the infidels wherever you find them. But then another verse says in the Holy Quran that whoever gives life to one human has given life to all of humanity. Whoever kills one human has killed all of humanity, right? Is there a contradiction? We say, hang on. Say, first of all, you don't take stuff out of context, right? So, first of all, the word infidel does not exist in the Holy Quran, okay? It's a Western term that's been used. It doesn't exist in the Quran. But that verse that they were talking about, if we read it in its entirety, and we will read it in detail tomorrow, inshallah, so make sure you tune in for tomorrow. But I will tell you this right off the bat, that verse was taken out of context. It's in reference to a certain event that occurred where there were a group of people who were against the Muslims, who were trying to push them out of Mecca, out of their homes. And so God commanded them, protect yourselves, right? And kill them where you find them, only if they attack you first. And do not fight with them unless they initiate the battle with you. Okay? And if they come to their senses, then forgive them and live with them peacefully. So you left all that out and you just took what? You said just kill them wherever you find them. Subhanallah, right? So we say there is no contradiction. There haven't been any contradictions. No one has been able to prove any contradiction in the Holy Quran at all. Okay? So then the Quran passes the second criterion. Okay? So far it's only the Quran that's made it through. Now for the next few criteria, the next three criteria, we will not be looking at the Torah or at the Bible. Okay? Because we already, they both already didn't pass the first criterion and they didn't pass the second criterion. But now the closest thing to the message of God seems to be the Holy Quran. So we're going to see, does it meet the next three criteria? We'll do that inshallah in the upcoming lecture. Until then, we say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, wal Fatiha ala arwah al-marhumin, masbuqatan mashru'atan bi salati ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. أحسن الله إليكم.